On a day that trade winds shook the Canucks roster to the core, the team saw its 3-game win streak come to an end in Dallas. We got lots to talk about, so let's get into it. This is Rink Wide Vancouver. Studios, downtown Vancouver on a Friday night, a night that saw the Dallas Stars defeat the Vancouver Canucks by a score of 5-3. It sounds like an exciting game with all the goals, but a bunch of them coming late to sort of boost the totals. And of course, the game secondary to the news that broke just prior to puck drop, the big trade of JT Miller. So we do have a lot to get into. It's Jeff, it's Patrick Johnson of Post Media and the Province sitting in with us tonight, and looking forward to getting PJ's thoughts on the game and the trade of JT Miller. Rink Wide brought to you in part by Bet365. Whether or whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure that you use code NATION when you open an account. And as you can imagine, Pat, the YouTube live stream is hopping tonight. Nobody cares that the Canucks lost this hockey game to the Dallas Stars or that the losing streak, or the winning streak is over.
Or your mullet, Jeff.
Or my mullet, yes. That was a lot of talk the other night after the win in Nashville. Hopefully my hair and my hairstyle not a focus, but you stay out of this one. Look, you stay in your lane when it comes to hair discussion. We got other things that we have to talk about when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks. Super chats. Yes, lots of people want in on the conversation, and we want to hear from you. So hit us up with the Super Chat, our charity partner, the BC Mental Health Foundation, changing the face of mental health and addiction by supporting breakthroughs in care, public understanding, research, and knowledge exchange. Please hear me out. We are going to get to the trade. Of course, we're going to get to the trade, but Rink Wide is a post-game podcast. We do this after each and every Vancouver Canucks game, regular season and playoffs. So we do have some hockey talk to get to, and I just kind of want to burn through that and leave lots of time for our thoughts and also the chat's thoughts on the JT Miller discussion. Canucks wasted a good start, Patrick. First 10 minutes, they outshot the Dallas Stars 7-1. But you got to capitalize. And unfortunately, this game looked and felt like far too many in the month of January where offense was a struggle, but you can understand, given the context of the day, these guys they're human beings. And we know that obviously there's been issues in that locker room. But I think that for a lot of guys, seeing JT Miller pack his bags and walk out, like that would be difficult. They leave Elias Pettersson aside for the moment. Yeah. JT's got friends in there. He's been here a while. He's developed relationships, and we know that when he's on, he's the heart and soul guy of this hockey club. And so I thought the Canucks did well to start the game, but maybe that wore off. And in the end, it was going to be a challenge. Dallas is a good team on home ice. They're a good team wherever they play.
Yeah.
In the end, the Canucks just didn't have enough.
Well, I found myself thinking a lot about just the cloud. There's just been this cloud hanging over, for a while, but definitely for a couple of weeks since, it became clear that this was where things were going. So, just the sort of emotional state of things, as you said, just watch. I mean, whether they literally saw him walk out with his bags or not, that it happened, unfolds an hour before the game. The players are at the rink already. We obviously have seen all the clips of JT arriving with his team. There's a lot there. There's a lot to deal with. no matter how they felt about him in the end. Like, it was just that has been removed. And, you know, I found myself wondering, okay, look at them coming out gangbusters. Okay, we're moving on to the next thing. The new era has started. And then just everything kind of petered out. And then, of course, as we said, the end of the game with all the concern about Hughes. I mean, the story has already shifted. I mean, like, right. I suppose that's the amazing thing about sports, isn't it? Is how quickly things can go.
Yeah, and so if people didn't watch the game, if they're joining us, listening to the podcast, whatever the case, Quinn Hughes played one shift in the final 5.5 minutes. He left for the locker room midway through the third period, came back for a power play. But even then, you could see this dynamic skater, this guy whose edge work is better than almost anybody's in the National Hockey League, was laboring, he was grimacing, and of course it didn't make much sense to continue to play him at that point, even though there were a bunch of goals, 4 goals in the final 3.5 minutes of the hockey game. That's why I said it sounds like, oh my goodness, they were trading goals back and forth. Really, this was a 2-1 game into the third period, and Roope Hintz kind of breaks the game wide open when he gets the step on Noah Juulsen, takes the puck to the net. You keep waiting for saves in moments, and Thatcher Demko delivered those in Nashville the other night. They came back to him. Man, did that look a lot like the Zach Hyman goal to open the scoring in Edmonton last week, where Hyman got behind Phil Hronek, cut hard from the left side, and just tucked it in and made it look pretty easy, slipping the puck really through and under Thatcher Demko. And so, look, Demko's night, 3 goals on 14 shots, that is not good enough.
It's those shots from the left side, and we've been noticing, if you look at the goal chart, you can dig them out in various places, you will notice that there's a cluster of shots that have been going in, or goals that have been going in from, sort of on top of the crease from his left, spots where he would have to seal off. Obviously, the left knee was where he had some issues. He had the issue. So he's now having, I think, it seems like still some issues with that. He's not, as you said, the big saves were there the other night. They needed some big saves tonight, and it was just another night where, he was fine, but, in a game where they ended up scoring 3 goals. I mean, even if it was a bizarre sequence, they did still score 3 goals. That could have changed the game.
Yeah, their last one came with 3 seconds left. Talk about a garbage time goal. Carson Soucy. But look, Jake Ottinger, one of the tops in the National Hockey League, his 26th victory. Only Connor Hellebuck has more. And so where we talk about the Canucks believing on a lot of nights that maybe they've got an edge in goal, whoever they turn to, this is one of the nights. Ottinger's going to the Four Nations. He's going to back up Connor Hellebuck, but he is one of the best in the business behind one of the stingiest defenses. But opportunity was knocking here. Miro Heiskanen, out of the lineup, unfortunate for the Stars, unfortunate for Team Finland, 25-minute-a-night defenseman, 25 points on the season. Like, that's a big blow to the Dallas Stars, and the Canucks weren't able to capitalize because for most of this hockey game, they managed just 1 goal. It was a pretty goal. Connor Garland on the finishing end of a beautiful rush by Nils Höglander. Garland gets his 14th of the season. It tied the game 1-1, and so you're thinking, all right, hey, first time in a while that the Canucks had fallen behind, because on that 3-game win streak, they hadn't trailed for a moment, but they had tied it up at 1 on the road. They're in a decent position, and it stayed that way till the late stages of the second. Derek Forbort takes a penalty. Danton Heinen lost his stick and started to run around a little bit. First of all, Forbort takes the penalty. And I said to you, there's the Canucks' best penalty killer. What are they going to do? And sure enough, Danton Heinen lost his stick. And how often do we see that? When a penalty killer loses his stick, these guys are too good. Yeah. They know. They're able to exploit it, work the puck around, and Jason Robertson in front of the net. He's not going to miss from there. And Robertson with his 18th of the season. I was a little surprised as I was doing homework and preparation. And yes, there is some homework and preparation that goes into these shows. Since Christmas, Jason Robertson's like 3rd in the NHL in scoring. Got off to a slow start. People don't talk about him a whole lot here, but kind of like Philip Forsberg the other night in Nashville, he's another guy that since the holiday break really has picked up the pace. And so the Canucks seeing a couple of the hotter players in the National Hockey League here in these last couple of games they played. Robertson ends up with 2 goals because he scores an empty netter as well. He had an assist on the Hintz goal. The breakaway goal that we just talked about, so a 3-point night for him, 3-point night for Roope Hintz. Let's get into the 3 stars, because I'm giving it away essentially there. But 3 stars are brought to you by Greta Bar YVR. And the 3 stars, we had some fun the other night. Did you see the selections in Nashville with UC Saros and Gustav Nyquist? The
hometown, Jeff.
I know. Well, 3 stars selected by Mike Heika, who long-time beat reporter who then moved to the team side, still does a nice job covering the Dallas Stars, fell on his shoulders tonight to pick 3 stars. Goes with Ottinger first. Now, I'm guessing that these were selected He probably had to have them with 5 minutes to go.
Yeah,
because Jake Ottinger gave up 3 goals.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was in consideration for your 3 stars.
He was, but we revised ours. So no Ottinger on our 3 stars. But the 3 stars in the building were Ottinger, Hintz, and Robertson. We go Rope Hintz with the first star. He had 2 goals. He has the game winner, as it turns out. A couple of hits in there as well. Jason Robertson heating up and now up to 19 goals on the season, so he's going to get to 20, and he'll probably get to 30, and who knows, if he continues this pace, maybe takes a run at something closer to 40 goals in the season, but he's at 19 right now, and he was a factor. That line was just a little too much for the Vancouver Canucks, as it turned out. And we give Nils Höglander a little sugar here, and we mentioned the pass that he made, carries the puck up the ice, showing some confidence. The other night was the shooter, coming in off that right side to score, to open the scoring in Nashville. Here, Höglander slides it across to Garland, and Garland's able to redirect it home. Nils Höglander has points in 3 of 4 games. Very quietly, he had an effective month of January.
Yeah.
Now, the bar is low, right, given his season, but I do think the month of January in totality, it's 6 points, not a huge total, but you think how much ice time, how much he played. He was a healthy scratch twice. 2 in the month of January, which kind of makes you shake your head when other guys have been struggling every bit as much. But, we'll go 3rd star for Nils Höglander tonight.
And, a player that, he did finally turn his game around. And a player they need to be, he's going to be paid to be effective. They need him. They need him to be that depth scorer and be the guy that did score 24 goals, Jeff.
Yeah.
You remember hearing about that?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Yeah.
I just noticed we shortchanged Jason Robertson a goal on the 3-star graphic, by the way.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Again, late goal. Things are changing on the fly here. Robertson did have 2 goals and 1 assist. 3 stars are brought to you by Greta Bar. YVR, we tell you after every Canucks game, you got to get to Greta. You're missing out if you haven't been. The big screens, arcade games, terrific new street food menu. They've got weekly drink specials that you want to take a look at as well. Greta Bar, the place to be. 50 West Cordova. Greta Bar, let the games begin. All right, couple of super chats. Don't want to get a whole lot further here. Appreciate the support for the BC Mental Health Foundation. Casey Shuffle, a regular contributor, says, hello, Decade of Darkness, my old friend. We'll see. And again, we'll leave the trade talk. I don't want to get too deep into it just yet, but lots of time and lots of trade talk coming. But we thank you for the super chat. Another one from Tyler says, did this, assuming he means the trade, play a factor in the Canucks' performance? Yeah, we talked about that. Again, you're watching a friend, a teammate, a heart and soul guy. The Canucks were down 2-1 going to the 3rd period. How many times over his time in Vancouver have you thought, watch JT in the 3rd period, just will this group back into a hockey game? Every night in the playoffs it felt that way. Plays that spark plug role. Well, he won't play it for the Canucks anymore. But, to answer the question, yes. I do think that that sort of trade, and it's felt for a couple of weeks now like this team was waiting for the shoe to drop, right? On a lot of nights, it felt like, and Jim Rutherford admitted it in the article with Gary Mason, like it had filtered into the locker room. Yeah. You and I are there on the ground every day. You could feel the vibe around this group. I think they were all waiting for this day to come.
Yeah, and I think, as I said earlier, like they came out looking like a team that was, hey, we can move on, but the reality is that Miller was a huge part of that lineup, right? I mean, whether he wasn't playing very, very well or not, he still wasn't in the lineup tonight. And, for all the shots they had, for all the possession they had, they didn't get inside much. And they gave up 2 goals, got to the ice. I mean, the shot map, when I was looking at it, kind of told the whole story at the end of the day, that the Canucks, they still need to find more. And whether JT Miller is here or not now is not the question. He is not here. And that team that we saw tonight, they may have been shell-shocked. They may have been sort of, holy smokes, what just happened? They're going to need to find their way forward, because this is the team they have now. As someone once famously said to you, Jeff, this is who they have.
That is true. I remember that. And look, like, Dallas outscored the Canucks 2-1 at even strength in this hockey game, or at 5-on-5. But make no mistake, like the scoring chances, the high dangers, favored the Stars considerably. Canucks mounted 5 high danger chances in the entire hockey game, according to Natural Stat Trick. It's a 60-minute game. Not all of it played at 5-on-5, but a lot of it, the bulk of it, you got to do more. And really, when I look at my own notes, as again, they shot the Stars 7-1 early on, couple of opportunities. But 5-on-5, like I just have nothing written down. I mean, I have very little written down for either team in this hockey game. Brock Besser had a one-timer on the power play. We sort of remarked about that in the second period, that it's good to see him shooting the puck. And I thought power play formation was curious. You take JT Miller out of the mix. I was glad to see Jake DeBrusk back. You got your leading goal scorer, who has been dropped down to the second unit. I'm not a huge fan of Connor Garland. I know they like him for entries and puck retrieval, but he's not a threat to shoot.
No.
If he's going to score power play goals, it's like in St. Louis the other night, where he'll sneak in from the side. And, in the blue paint, he's not afraid to go to those areas, but I still found it a little strange. You're not going to find many teams that have their leading goal scorer not on the top unit. So without JT Miller, yes, Jake DeBrusk back out of that top unit. The Canucks power play gets one late, and it is DeBrusk. We haven't said that very often, certainly in the month of January. His first goal in 11 games, just 2 goals here in the month of January, both coming on the power play. And that is a concern. That he leads the Canucks in goals with 18, hasn't scored a 5-on-5 goal since the first game after the Christmas break against the Seattle Kraken.
I'm shaking my head for those who aren't watching on YouTube.
Well, we do a stat that stands out. That one certainly a stat that stands out. But yes, Patrick is shaking his head without a doubt. But, I mean, again, you always say with him, he's streaky, and you can't get on a streak without the first one. So let's see where it goes from here. He's got Detroit coming up. He had a hat-trick against the Red Wings in Motown. So maybe just the vision and the sight of the Red Wings jersey will get him going on Sunday night. But they need him, especially without JT Miller, and we'll see what Philip Hedl brings to the mix here. But they need Jake DeBrusk to get going again here. So even a garbage time goal, stuffing one in on the power play, maybe it can jumpstart him and get moving back in the right direction.
Big pressure on your guy Pia Suter to be the second line center.
Yeah, which, again, is part of this discussion that we'll get to with all the fallout from the trade. If they still have designs on being a playoff team, and obviously Quinn Hughes' health and well-being now factors into all that, but an ineffective, for the most part, Elias Pettersson all season, and now Pia Suter stepping into the second-line center role. Does that scare an opponent if they match up against the Vancouver Canucks come playoff time? Just a couple other things about this hockey game that I want to mention. Something worth monitoring here. Canucks got crushed in the face-off circle, as you thought maybe they would. JT has been really good in that department, regardless of how much value you put on face-offs. But the Canucks ended up winning 22 and losing 31, so just 42% on the night in the face-off circle. And Elias Pettersson took a lot of face-offs, 24 of them. Only won 9, 38% on the draw there. So that's another area that, we'll continue to watch and see how the Canucks fare without their best faceoff guy no longer in the lineup. One other thing that I wanted to mention here, the fact that how many times have we seen this from the Vancouver Canucks where we were told against Washington, the final home game before the road trip, that Kiefer Sherwood was a game-time decision.
And maybe he would join the trip.
And might join the trip. And now it's turned into a 4-game absence. And they didn't lose because they didn't have Kiefer Sherwood here.
Yeah.
But we talk about messaging an awful lot. And this went from game-time decision. Remember Quinn Hughes in the game before Christmas was a game-time decision. He played that night, and then he missed 4.
Yeah.
We won't know until and look, there are way bigger issues right now for the Vancouver Canucks. But I just wanted to point out that Kiefer Sherwood, we were told might join them on the trip. He didn't. And so who knows the extent of his injury and if it's going to continue here through the weekend or when we will see Kiefer Sherwood back. But, I say they didn't lose because they didn't have him in the lineup. They would certainly welcome the spark that he brings. No JT Miller and no Kiefer Sherwood. You got to go to Joshua back, but this isn't a team that's full of spark plugs up front.
I mean, I find myself wondering, you look at this game, I mean, obviously home game on Sunday, but, there's a 2-week break after this week, right? So all of a sudden, if it's something that needs healing, you get 4 weeks off. And that's similar to the Hughes thing. Okay, well, we'll see what happens with Hughes. I mean, I assume he is not going to be going to the Four Nations. But yeah, Sherwood in a game like this felt like the kind of game that they could have used a guy like him. Just the way that hustle is, get in, throw those hits. I mean, obviously we know all but the hits, but throw some effective hits. He's a guy that scores around the net. For a team that's, like I said, struggled to get to the net, he's a guy that would have been good for that.
A super chat from Tyler, another one from Tyler, says, cause for panic after seeing Quinn Hughes appearing hurt. We already addressed that, and again, without knowing the full extent. Yeah. But yes, anytime Quinn Hughes steps away from the bench for any length of time and down the tunnel, followed by somebody on the medical staff. Like, yeah, I mean, that's massive red flag material. Even before then, Quinn's been so good on so many nights. I didn't think this was anywhere close to a banner night for him. But my goodness, yes, if he's out again, look out for the Vancouver Canucks because their playoff hopes, forget the trade and everything else, their playoff hopes rest on the shoulders of 43.
And, I mean, how many times have we said, we talk so much how bad Miller and Pettersson have been, but the usual, imagine where the season would have been without him, right? Like, the season he is having has kept everything afloat, and they're in a playoff hunt anyway. He has been everything. It's. I mean, obviously, people have put forward the argument of this guy should be the Hart because of how the trophy is worded. Most valuable to his team. I mean, no there are probably no players that have been more valuable to their team than Quinn Hughes this season. For the mere fact that this team would be like dead last in the league without him. So yeah, you certainly hope that whatever it was that he tweaked, it seems like late in the game, is something that a little rest. I mean, they're flying home tomorrow, so he's not like he's sitting on a plane. He can get some treatment right away after the game, and they can figure out with a little bit of rest and a little bit of recovery, and hopefully he's. I mean, we'll see. I guess we'll see if he plays on Sunday. Games are fast and furious here.
All right, I want to move into trade talk, but let's get to the stat that stands out here because this one tells a little bit of a story as well, in as much as. The Canucks have two goaltenders they believe in. Thatcher Demko was terrific the other night in Nashville. Not the least bit surprised that they came back with him. And I wonder if part of the decision was his record against the Dallas Stars. This is the first time he's ever suffered a regulation loss against the Dallas Stars in his career in 9 starts. He's now 7-1-1. And as we said, 3 goals on 14 shots. That's not good enough.
No.
The final shots on the night, 29-16. So the Canucks almost hold a 2-1 edge or margin in the shots on goal, but ultimately that means nothing now. But yes, first time that Thatcher Demko has tasted outright defeat. First time that he hasn't guided the Canucks to some sort of point against the Dallas Stars. This is the first meeting of the year. Stars are the last opponent the Canucks had to face this season, so they will see them 2 more times, and we'll see if Demko gets a chance for redemption. But that's absolutely our stat that stands out, that a first in the National Hockey League for Thatcher Demko. 5-3 the final. Canucks 3-game win streak comes to an end. Their record falls to 23-18-10. They remain on 56 points, which keeps them below the playoff bar. This was an opportunity. Calgary was a winner. Calgary made its it made its move on Thursday night, and I think the Flames think that they are better in the here and now, and so we'll see how all of this affects the Vancouver Canucks, but they're still looking up at the Calgary Flames and everybody else on the other side, the right side of the playoff bar. So they'll have to wait until Sunday for a chance to climb the ladder. The record out on the road is now 14 wins, 8 outright losses, and 4 OTLs or shootout losses.
Do you think Torts will be meeting Kuzi at the airport and just telling him he's benched right away?
This idea that Andrei Kuzmenko is going to be a Matvei Michkov whisperer because they played together in the K a bunch of years ago.
They speak Russian, Jeff. I was like, what? What are we talking about? I don't understand that trade at all.
Well, I get it from the Flames standpoint.
I mean, I get it from the Flames. You want to send us? Oh, okay.
I guess it was just getting out from under the contract of Farabee, particularly. But Kuzmenko on his 3rd team now, pretty much playing out the string, and got to think that he's heading back to the K when this thing is done. But hey, he made $11 million plus. Off the backs of the Vancouver Canucks in the contract that he got in that first season. So, all right, before we switch gears here, and I would imagine that
people have been waiting, Jeff.
Been waiting. All right, let's hear from Canucks defenseman Tyler Myers after a 5-3 loss on a day that, and he's good friends with JT Miller. 2 veterans in that locker room. I think 2 big voices in that locker room. So, kind of curious to hear from Tyler Myers post-game in Dallas.
Going into tonight's game?
Yeah, I was, when it's the business side of it, right? Anything like that happens, it's always tough, especially Millsy. Been together for 5.5 years here. Has been such a big part of the room. It's always a weird feeling. I know I didn't get to see him. It happened so fast before the game. I know he's emotional, and he's been such a big part of the city, the team. I'm in a lot of ways I'm happy for him for a fresh start. A team that's familiar, and I don't know what the situation is, but hope to see him tonight. I'm not sure if he's gone.
How was he as a teammate for you?
He was great. Incredible competitor. He held so much weight in the room, probably the most I've seen on any team I've been on. And there's no doubt in my mind he's gonna do very well wherever he goes.
Clearly got to a point where a move had to be made. Do you hope now that this is behind the team, that you guys can kind of evolve and grow and have the noise now gone?
Yeah, I mean, there was an incredible amount of unnecessary noise around all this stuff the last month or two. Like you said, in a lot of ways, I'm glad it's a fresh start for both sides in terms of the noise, and you always want to look forward, and I wish Millsy all the best. We'll talk a bunch.
Rob said sometimes it could seep into the game of the team. Was it more of an energy zap for you?
Sorry?
Was it an energy zap at sometimes, just dealing with it?
I thought the guys played a really strong game tonight. I thought we did a lot of good things. We'll look at ways to always get better, but guys played hard tonight. It's a close game. A couple empty netters at the end made it look, the score didn't really match how the game was. But yeah, always a weird feeling. Guys handled it well.
All right, there you go. Tyler Myers post-game. Tyler Myers turns 35, by the way, tomorrow, so an early happy birthday to him. Doesn't get to celebrate a victory and doesn't get to celebrate with JT Miller. Said he hadn't seen him, was hoping to catch up with him. The Rangers are in Boston, and every game is a big game for the Rangers these days. I would wonder if JT could get on a flight from Dallas. Certainly there's Dallas to Boston flights, but it's an early game in Boston. That seems like a lot of turnaround, a quick turnaround, so we'll see. But you make the trade. You want this key piece. You made the deal to help this Ranger team get to the playoffs. So every game that goes by is an opportunity for the Rangers, so we'll see. We'll have to wait and see if JT Miller is in the Boston or in the New York Rangers lineup in Boston on Saturday. Now, as we transition into all this trade talk, and there's just so many angles to come at, but interesting to hear Tyler Myers talk about the unnecessary noise.
That word stood out to me.
And look, Tyler's been in the market. He's been on the receiving end of a bunch of it. He has to be smart enough to understand, and especially given what Jim Rutherford said earlier this week, that yes, there's noise. I don't know how much it was unnecessary.
I found myself wondering. That's the kind of thing I would follow up with him, because, what do you mean by that? Because sure, lots of chatter. They get tired of chatter. I get it. They know it, but they get it. But also, I'm wondering if he was saying, why did this take so long?
Right.
Because there was certainly an element the last couple of weeks, and I talked to JT Miller last Saturday, and he admitted that, things had been getting to him and that it had distracted him, and he had to figure out a way not to let that stuff get to him. Certainly sounds like they thought he was going to be traded 2 weeks ago. So, if you have already moved on and all of a sudden it's not, I can understand that. So I don't know whether I get why you're sort of getting that he's talking about us, but I do find myself wondering a little bit too if that's him saying, why did this take so long? Because if they know, as we understood, they've known for weeks they needed to make this change. Why did it take so long, especially if this is what the deal was? Because it's not like the deal is that exceptional. It's not like this was a deal that they were waiting for. It sounds like it was pretty much the deal that they'd agreed to a couple weeks ago. So anyway, I picked up on that as well. And, it's gonna be difficult. The other thing was him talking about how important he was emotionally in the room. For better, I think from our perspective, for better or worse, right? Like I found myself thinking, do you really want to have one pole in your room like that? That might have been I guess that's the old Mark Messier way of doing things. Sorry to everybody that I just mentioned that, but you know what I mean? Like that, I found myself thinking, if that really was the case, man, that's a lot to deal with. And in many ways, that's that's hard on the player, whether he intends that to be or not. So anyway, it's definitely a new era, and there's a lot for this team to sort out. And as we've discussed, the guy like Elias Pettersson, like this is his team now. He's gonna have to show the way. There's whether he wants it or not, there's going to be people looking to him to be the guy now, and he's being paid to be the guy. So there's not much choice.
So JT Miller goes to the New York Rangers, along with Eric Brandstrom and prospect Jackson Dorrington, a college player at Northeastern. In exchange, the Canucks get Philip Hedl, they get Victor Mantini, and they get a first-round pick that is protected, can't be in the top 13. That's the protection on it for the New York Rangers, but ultimately it's Hedl. It's a 22-year-old right-shot defenseman with some size. So Rick Tocchet and his coaching staff will like that. A guy that's played 15 NHL games. Mancini was a fifth-round draft pick a few years ago, so he wasn't a top prospect.
No.
Sort of had a long and winding road to get to the National Hockey League. And then, we'll see what they do with this first-rounder because we know the history here. 2 years ago, in fact, 2 years ago this weekend, they traded Bo Horvat to the Islanders, got a first-rounder in return, flipped that to the Red Wings to get Filip Hronek. It is crazy, and I tweeted this out. Like 2 years ago on Jan 30th, it was Horvat out the door. Last year on Jan 31st, it was Kuzmenko at a package out the door, Lindholm in, and here on Jan 31st, it's JT Miller is gone. So there is something about the last couple of days of January. In fact, go back even further than that, back to January of 22. It was the week that Patrick Allvin was hired by the Vancouver Canucks.
If you really want to go back, January of 2006, Jim Rutherford trades for Dougie Weight.
That is going way back.
It's a tradition.
Way back. Just some instant reaction. Your thought. We haven't really had a chance as it all came down here in the hour before puck drop.
Yeah, as I got down here. I mean, as we've said, it was something that was inevitable. We knew it was going to happen. The mood in the room had to shift for whatever reason. We're still trying to figure that part out. But the mood in the room had to shift. And so you do wonder about the addition through subtraction element of this now. I mean, obviously, JT Miller had 103 points last year.
Yep.
Like, that's not something you replace. And, I always felt that the sort of criticism, listen, not a great defensive player, right? Made miscues. But the guy brought points. He was a point-per-game player his entire time here. He was on track to be, a Canuck all-time great. So that part, like the performance was always fun to watch. Other than, I guess, Henrik Sedin, I had not seen a passer as good as him. There were passes I remember he would just absolutely nail, breakout passes from your own end, diagonal down the other to spring a guy. The willingness to go in and get the puck, never at the level of Todd Bertuzzi, but, shades of it made you think a little bit about going down and getting the puck back and making something happen. Like the sort of honesty that we always got from him post game, the willingness to talk. I hadn't talked to him in a couple of weeks when I asked for him last Saturday, thinking, I should have a chat with this guy. And, we had, in terms of hockey, we had a reasonable conversation. So, and a guy that loved being here. Like that's the other thing that stands out to me. And I wrote a story a couple of years ago that, I asked him, what's it like living in Vancouver? And he jumped out of his chair to talk about how much, in the end, they chose to be here. He signed to be here. So that part's, that part was important. But, in terms of being a teammate and all that, it's clear something had to change. So I'm glad it's over. I was sick of thinking about it, sick of being asked about it. That's the selfish media part. I know it's our job, and this is an amazing job. But I'm glad that we'll have something else to talk about. Now I'm fascinated to see what they do with that. What they do with the first round pick. What do they do with the cap space? How do they reset this team? Because you've got to believe that's what they want to do next.
Yep. And look, we should take a moment here and salute not just JT, but his wife Natalie. They've got 3 young kids. You're right. They committed to the Canucks in the city as much as the city and the Canucks committed to them. I believe JT when he said, when he signed the contract, he expected to play it out. He wanted to be a Canuck. He wanted to win here. Yeah. It doesn't always work that way. And the Rangers obviously drafted him. They were familiar with this player. They kind of feel that's the type of player that can get them above the playoff bar in the Eastern Conference. We'll see how that all plays out for them. But, there's a person behind every hockey player, obviously. And up until this year, I'm with you. He was a little rough around the edges. That was part of his charm.
Yeah.
Unvarnished.
Yeah.
But he was a great talker and pulled no punches.
Nope.
Obviously, it changed this year. And as the story grew and the pressure mounted and then the leave of absence, when you think of his year here, Started with a Gordie Howe hat trick on opening night.
Forgot about
The
that.
massive hit on Kevin Rooney.
Yeah.
The fight. And then they were down. And when we talked about, who do you turn to when you're down? JT came ripping down the left wing and the big slap shot and tied the game. They ended up losing in overtime. But there was that. There was the benching against Nashville. That was followed by him, just disappearing, the personal leave. He came back. There were some struggles there, obviously. Never got back to the level. There was the weekend before Christmas when the fire was at its hottest about the relationship, and he flat out denied that there was any sort of rift there. Had the 4-point night in Montreal, and here we are now, and he's no longer a Vancouver Canuck.
And one other note, I mean, him and Natalie had bought a suite this year. I mean, for a team that I think it's not the same as it used to be in terms of how they interact with the community, especially with charitable stuff. I mean, obviously the Sedins were the pinnacle, Trevor Linden was the pinnacle, but there was a lot. The full team would visit Children's Hospital, things like that. But this year they did quietly bring families in who were having, especially I think kids were sick or whatever, and that they didn't look for the praise, they didn't look for the noise, but certainly that was something that always stood out. I mean, I know how much JT loved being a parent. And we touched on that briefly, like he said, listen, I'm trying to be a father and a husband first, and we all have jobs, and that was something we can all experience, and that was something I was maybe going to follow up with him because that was something that we could all relate to, but in the end, something broke, and so here we are. We're now in the post JT Miller era.
Scott White in the chat says Ranger fans online are pretty high on both Hedl and Mancini, so we'll see about that. The story with Hedl is that, I mean, there was some question about whether his career was over.
Devastating concussion.
Last year, at the start of last year. He ended up playing 10 games in 2023-24. Mm-hmm. He's played 41 for the Rangers this year, 11 goals, so he actually had more goals than JT Miller on the season. Now, we know it's been an off year for Miller with the time missed as well, but 11 goals, 9 assists, so 20 points. He's a half a point a game guy. Really curious to see where he slots in. There's some thought that really, and we had Frank Saravalli on our special Canucks Convo podcast just before the game, and Frank, based out east, has seen a fair bit of Hedl and said he probably sees him more as a third-line center as opposed to a second-line center, but he's a 25-year-old, and I think the Canucks are hoping that there is enough upside there that he can take a run at being the second-line center for this hockey club. He was the 21st overall selection in the 2017 NHL draft, so a first-rounder 7 years ago. And we'll see. Does he arrive on the scene? Does he get plugged in for Sunday against the Detroit Red Wings? Does it take him more? Sometimes there's visa issues, and it's not as easy to get here and get cleared right away. So the Canucks have 4 games to go between now and the Four Nations Faceoff. I would assume he'll play as soon as he is cleared, but I don't know if it's going to happen as quickly as Sunday night.
I'm mildly intrigued by Victor Mancini as well. Mm-hmm. A guy that I was texting JD Berkwith about him, and he played 2 seasons in Sweden, which is
during
surprising.
COVID.
During COVID, well, he was over there already, but and then he kept going. So, just kind of a fascinating story. Played in Nebraska Omaha, which made me chuckle a little bit because the Canucks are big fans of that program.
Yep.
So it did not surprise me that this was a player. Once I saw that, I was like, okay, that makes sense. And just. Listen, you're never going to get full value, right? Like, we knew that. They accepted they weren't going to get the trade they wanted to get. When you were forced to move a player, and every team in the NHL knew that. Mm-hmm. And, you're also dealing with a player that gets to control where he's going to go, if at all. So, Hedl is, listen, he's having a right season. He had a pretty decent season a couple of years ago. Then he had the concussion. But realistically, this is a third-line center. It's you're never going to get full value. Menching, like I said, he's interesting, but he's realistically, is he an upgrade on Vinny Desharnais? I mean, that's a pretty low bar. I'm higher than on Desharnais than I think most, and I still admit that that's not very high.
Well,
so
on a night when Noah Juleson didn't look particularly good on the one goal there, we'll see. I mean, there are roster ramifications and all those types of things. I don't know if Mancini's going to get called up and given an opportunity. Again, he's played 15 games for the Rangers, but he spent the bulk of this season in Hartford in the American Hockey League. Hedl's best season before the concussions, 22 goals, 23 assists, so a 45-point top end right now, and you hope that there's more there to give. We'll find out. From the Rangers' perspective, they get JT Miller, who is what he is, flaws and all, but they don't give up Braden Schneider.
Nope.
And ultimately, they don't give up Alex Lafreniere. So I think those were pieces that they were reluctant to move off of. Canucks, I think, wanted one or both of those pieces. So in the end, as you said, JT controlled the cards here. He had the no movement clause, and that was always going to make it difficult. And so ultimately, the Canucks felt that addition by subtraction to some degree, clear the air in that locker room, pave a way for this group now to move forward, and ultimately we'll see how it all shakes down. All right, another super chat. This one from Sapporo J, who's donating 500 Japanese yen.
Ooh.
I like that. It's all in support of the BC Mental Health Foundation. Do you think the cap savings in this deal is underreported and an extremely valuable intangible piece of the deal? Well, that's always the way, the opportunity cost. What do you do now? Hedl makes 4 1/4 or 4.4 for this year and 2 more after this. So they get out from the entirety, no retention on JT Miller.
Yeah.
And with 2 first-round draft picks, again, can this front office get creative between the draft capital and the cap space that they've got to work? Like, they're not done. There certainly isn't they're probably less of a contender now than they were earlier this afternoon. So this front office and the heavy work and heavy lifting, not done, not by a long shot. But yeah, I mean, I would agree with that sentiment that, yes, we're so focused on the immediate return that it's what can this front office do now with some of the cap savings that they have been able to gain with this deal.
They now have the 9th most cap space in the NHL. They're projected at about $12.2 million as it stands right now, as the roster's currently constructed.
Well, Jim Rutherford always talked about that cap cushion from day one on the job.
They got it.
And
they can go do something.
They do have some room now. All right, we heard from Tyler Myers earlier. I'm curious to hear. Rick Tocchet post-game after a 5-3 loss to the Dallas Stars. Win streak is over, modest as it was, but it has come to an end at 3 games. This is the head coach, I would imagine, on the trade. I haven't listened, but as much as the trade as the game itself. Here's Rick Tocchet after the game in Dallas.
What's in the fight in this one from your group with it all?
I was proud of the team. Thought they played really well. It's a good hockey team over there. Kept them low amount of shots. Especially teams won the battle. They got the power play goal, and we couldn't get it. But I thought for the most part the guys played hard.
What was the message to the team when JT's gone just about an hour before puck drop? What did you tell them?
Well, it's a business. The way it is. When you're in this business long enough, there's going to be things like that. I thought the guys handled it well. Millsy was a big part of the team, and I'm sure he's emotional and stuff. Like, it was a kind of emotional thing, but it's a business, right? It's things happen.
As a coach, what kind of player are you losing in JT?
Millsy's played great hockey for the Canucks and myself, so obviously a heart and soul guy. So I think he's going to do well over there.
I think people probably realized something was going to happen after Jim talked on Tuesday, or where it came out on Tuesday. How much energy had you used on this, Rick, to try to get something resolved before it couldn't be?
Well, I think it's important that it's like a pack mentality. I think with this team, I don't know, a couple of years I've been here, we don't go through these long losing streaks because guys have done a nice job of blocking out distraction. There's we've been a little inconsistent this year, but I got to give the guys credit. That they can focus, and hopefully can move on and get focused even stronger.
What do you think this will do for Elias, if indeed it was kind of holding him back a little bit, or was draining his energy maybe a little bit?
I don't know about that. I mean, obviously, we need him to play. I mean, we need him to come up with some big moments for us, and hopefully this, he knows that he's an important part of our team, and he's got to get going.
What do you know about Hedl?
I heard some really good things. I heard he's very excited to come. I know somebody in the New York organization said that there's a lot to work with, very talented kids, so that's good. Mancini, I hear, is a really big defenseman, young, that can play. So, I think there's some stuff to work with.
You said emotional day for JT. Can it be emotional for a coach as well?
Yeah, I mean, I love Millsy. I thought he's played his ass off for me. So, there's things that happen behind the scenes that they happen, and you sure you get emotional. Millsy was a hell of a player for us.
All right, there you go, Rick Tocchet. Moments after the loss down in Dallas, some praise for JT Miller, the work that he did. Talked about what he's heard about Philip Hedl there, and heard good things. You'd hope that he had. But again, we talk about the impact that it has on the Vancouver Canucks, all of a sudden, moments before the game, and look, Tocchet would have had an idea that this was coming down, but he's got an ISO lineup. He's got to prepare for a hockey game.
Yeah.
Got to be difficult on the coach and the coaching staff as well.
Yeah. I mean, I found an hour before the game would be, like I said earlier, like they all arrived together.
I know.
And all of a sudden he's got to go. I mean, it's, Rick Tocchet was the guy that was coached or traded a few times in his career. It'd be interesting to hear if he ever had this happen on game day like this. But, you could tell from him. I don't know if choked up is the word, but, that was a player that he had a lot of time for and had connected with. And the success that Miller had, especially last year, was down to the coach and the way that Tocchet had found a way to channel a lot of that energy. Because, certainly a criticism and a deserved criticism of Miller in the past had been his emotions. That, he would let his emotions take him too far. And certainly last year, that was something they had success. He found a way to channel a lot of that and a lot of the bark and get it focused on beating the other team and not, he said it at one point, I can, in the end, I have to focus on controlling myself. He doesn't play calm, he once said to me, but he has to play with energy, he has to play with with vigor. But how the standards got set on those around him, I think, was always the challenge. And Tocchet had found a way to channel that and make sure that he was focused on what he was doing. So, listen, Tocchet is going to take this on. He has seen players come and go before, that's now on him to. I mean, he always says it, right? It's on him to make it happen. Murph asking about Elias Pettersson. I mean, that's the question everybody's going to ask about, right? Now that's the challenge. He's has seen this player had success. He arrived in the latter half of Pettersson's big season 2 years ago, had the player playing great until last February, basically. And so now it's to find a way to find the guy that was the one of the NHL stars of the month last January.
Elias Pettersson played 22 minutes and 29 seconds. In St. Louis, he played 14 minutes. So in 2 games, he's seen his ice time bump. He was the number one guy. He started the game with Jake DeBrusk and Elias with Brock Besser. And I think that's the right call. As much as the Swedish line had some success in Nashville the other night, you've got to get your number one guy and your leading goal scorer back together. And they did that. I thought he had a good first period. I thought he was strong. Again, we talked about the Canucks coming out and carrying the play for the first 10 minutes or so, but once Dallas scored, game seemed to shift there. We didn't really talk a lot about the individual goals, but man, Filip Hronek getting bumped off the puck pretty easily behind the net, and Aatu Räty getting his chance in the NHL. He leaves his man. Looked like he was right there at an arm's length and allowed back to find the back of the net and open the scoring in that hockey game. So a couple of individual breakdowns led to the first Dallas goal. But Elias Pettersson's night, 22-29. He had 3 shots on goal on 4 attempts. We talked about the fact that he had a tough go in the faceoff circle. And this is it. Like, he's the $11.6 million man. If JT Miller was, in fact, an impediment, that's been cleared out of the way. But we said this, that if Elias Pettersson got what he wanted, and that was for this to be his team, it also comes with a ton of pressure. And Patrick, we know he doesn't love the noise around him, and yet it's going to get deafening here unless things change. I will say he did have an assist on the Jake DeBrusk goal. That is points in 3 straight games.
Yep.
Baby steps here. And no, he didn't dominate the game, and there were better players on the other side, and the Stars' best players ultimately found the score sheet and made a difference in this hockey game. We keep waiting for all of that, but, assists, he hasn't been doing much in the way of setting up teammates. No. He does have assists in 3 straight games.
No, he's on the puck. To me, that's what matters the most. And he is paid to produce and paid to lead. So you would rather those, tonight's assist had come while they were, it was a 1-1 game, right? Not when it was 4-1, if I'm not mistaken. And that is the difference. But like you said, if we're looking for moral victories and baby steps, the fact that he did, was on the puck, he was making moves in the corner, making stuff try to happen, try to sort of create some space for himself to work with is good. You just hope that the confidence grows from there and that, again, he gets back to that player that we saw in the first half of last season.
As I mentioned, 4 games to go now before the Four Nations face-off. Three of them at home. They're at home to Detroit. They're at home to Colorado. They go to San Jose on a one-off. And then you got the Leafs in next Saturday night. Leafs starting a road trip in Edmonton tomorrow. So they're working their way out west here. I am really curious. And, again, there's just been so many other storylines here. We have watched Quinn Hughes play through whatever it is that is wrong with his left hand, and it hasn't slowed him at all. And I said tonight wasn't his best night. But we also are now kind of on watch with whatever it was, lower body, hamstring, we're guessing, but the skating looked labored. Should Quinn Hughes be going to the Four Nations phase?
No. I mean, if that injury is sort of what it looks like, which to be, I mean, I think initially I said maybe hamstring. I mean, I'm obviously just guessing.
Yep.
But hamstring or groin, just the way the sort of level of discomfort as he tried to skate. That's that's a guy that needs to rest and give it a chance to heal, not be sort of pressing to play in games that these guys say really matter and aren't just another all-star game. So I mean at this point, I think people picked up on it. It was interesting to see people point out with the letter stuff that he wasn't a letter on the team, one of the best defensemen in the whole tournament.
Yep.
But certainly, I mean, I said this to you before we started recording. I mean, when we talked to him on I guess it was on Saturday, and he was talking, and he had, that's right, it was on Saturday postgame, and he still had the brace on his hand, and I was like, oh, that's right, he's still dealing with that, and it's been 6 weeks, right? Is that feels like some kind of fracture, like that's a guy that could benefit from 12 days off, 2 weeks off, whatever it is, and again, like I mentioned about Sherwood earlier. I mean, this whole week, obviously it's a big week and you need the Canucks to win, but that temptation to get him fit and rested and give him, 3 weeks off with the run out to the season coming, it's going to be interesting to watch for sure.
Well, we saw Jacob Markstrom, and he's legitimately injured. He's not available, but he pulled out. Miro Heiskanen got hurt the other night. He's not going to play for Team Finland. We saw Alex Pietrangelo make the decision. And that's going to be a blow to Team Canada. And now you've got Quinn Hughes, and you just wonder. The opportunity to play with his brother, to play with the best players of this era. It's intriguing and enticing. I get it, but I do wonder. And especially if this is any more serious, then we wonder if it is. So we'll see where things go. Certainly a story worth monitoring here over the weekend and as we work closer to the Four Nations break. Now, I mentioned the Four Nations because we have an opportunity for you to come join the Vancouver Nation Network crew to watch Canada against the U.S. Whether Quinn is playing, we don't know. February 15th, Greta Bar, 50 West Cordova. It's all presented by Fountain Tire. Sakaris and Price are going to host the night. We've got raffles with exclusive prizes to be won. Chance to party it up and cheer for a once-in-a-lifetime Team Canada. And it's all in support of Social Run Club YVR. Tickets are $10, or there's the VIP option as well. That includes for $40. It includes a burger, beverage, and an arcade game card. You can snag seating for up to 6 people with each VIP package, so you can bring your buddies down. Doors at 4, puck drop at 5. It is a 19-plus event. Grab your tickets now at nationgear.ca. All right, obviously focusing on the Canucks and their loss in Dallas. They come home to face the Detroit Red Wings on Sunday. There are other things going on around the National Hockey League, and at this point in the program, we always turn our attention to our line of the night, which is brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Rink Wide Vancouver. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. Use code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Mentioned that the Rangers are in Boston. It's a big game in the Eastern Conference. We don't know if JT Miller is going to play, but I wonder what impact the trade and the boost to the guys that are there. They're getting a guy that has some playoff experience. I wonder if there is some jump on the part of the New York Rangers. You can get them at -105 on the money line against the Boston Bruins. That is our Bet365 line of the night. All right. Red Wings. I watched them against the Edmonton Oilers last night. Ended up winning in a shootout. They're down 2-0. They beat the Edmonton Oilers in Edmonton. 3-2 was the final. Wings have won 4 in a row. This is what's interesting to me, though. Like, the Vancouver Canucks catch a Detroit team on Sunday. And Sunday is a 5 o'clock start. So it's an early puck drop at Rogers Arena. It's going to be an early start here for Rink Wide when they're done. But keep that in mind that a 5 o'clock start in Vancouver, after the Wings are the late game on Hockey Night in Canada, 8 o'clock local in Calgary. Now, they gain an hour coming this way.
But still 7 o'clock. Like
they got to play the game, travel, and the games are 22 hours apart. Yeah. And pretty good chance that the Canucks are going to see a backup goaltender, although the Oilers saw Alex Lyon last night, and he was terrific. So we'll see if Cam Talbot gets to start against Calgary or if they come back with Lyon and
the immortal Cam Talbot, Jeff,
who had to pull himself out of the game the last time the Canucks saw the Red Wings. A couple of things there. Dylan Larkin last night played 25 minutes and 3 seconds, had 10 shots on goal on 14 attempts, took 39 faceoffs.
That sounds exhausting.
And won 24 of them, scored a goal, and then he scored the game decider in the shootout. Like, this guy, he's having an incredible season. He's tied for the league lead in power play goals. He's one of 3 20-goal scorers on this Red Wings roster with Lucas Raymond and Alex DeBrincat. But really, it's those 3 and then a massive drop-off. I think Patrick Kane is 4th on the team in goals with like 11. So if you hold those 3 guys at bay, you stand a pretty good chance. But it's easier said than done. So they got a really good power play. Power play is 4th in the National Hockey League, but their penalty kill a disaster, under 70% on the season. And, of course, they made their coaching change at the Christmas break. And since Todd McClellan took over, they're 12-4-1. So they're playing some really good hockey.
I'm not surprised that he's got them sorted out. I was gonna say, who I wish I could get sort of a reaction quote on the idea of taking 39 faceoffs in a game. JT Miller. I bet you have something fun to say about that, but we'll have to move on and try for Pius Suter. Like that.
12-4-1 under Todd McClellan. They're one of the highest scoring teams in the league since the coaching change, and they've got the top power play since the break. So just keep all that in mind. Canucks did beat the Red Wings at, I was going to say Joe Louis Arena. Of course, they don't play there anymore. Little Caesars. On December the 1st, Jake DeBrusk had the hat trick that day. Took a pass from Elias Pettersson, snapped it home for the OT winner. 5-4 was the final in that hockey game. And we'll see if the Canucks can sweep the season series from the Detroit Red Wings. The new look Vancouver Canucks. No more of that J.T. Miller. And that's the other thing is March 22nd, Madison Square. It's an early start. It's a 10 o'clock start on the West Coast. But yes, the Canucks do have a game left against the New York Rangers. There will be some interest in that.
Is there a Greta Bar location in the Midtown Manhattan?
There should be. If there was, we would go. Take the show on the road. But it'll be interesting to see where the Rangers are by then. It'll be interesting to see where the Vancouver Canucks are by the time that mid-March rolls around. That's part of a 5-game road trip, I think, or a 6-game road trip maybe even, but starts in St. Louis, and then they do the run through the New York area. And, of course, last year had so much success on that road trip when they barnstormed through New York and New Jersey and into Pittsburgh as well. That was then. This is now.
Speaking of goals by Elias Pettersson, right?
Yes.
That's when that happened.
Yeah, all part of his 14 goals in the month of January 1 year ago. What a difference a year makes. And unfortunately, January comes to an end for the Vancouver Canucks with a loss in Dallas and with the loss of really one of their heart and soul guys in J.T. Miller. So the J.T. Miller era is over in Vancouver. It was fun while it lasted. A guy laid it on the line just about every night out. Was so good in the playoffs. And I do wonder if there is a lasting sort of legacy for J.T. Miller. He had the bubble playoff that we all watched from afar, and then we waited for this group to get back to the playoffs, and they did last year. I wonder if that's maybe JT's legacy, and we won't know till the playoffs roll around again. But that was a guy that played playoff hockey and showed up when it mattered for the Vancouver Canucks. And if there's something that other guys that are left behind can take from the way that he played, it's that you have to bring it at that level to be successful in the postseason.
Absolutely. The guy that who most nights, that's what was so baffling about so much of the season was that most nights he was a guy that showed up, right? He produced like legitimately. There were very few of those points that were sort of, oh yeah, here you go, here's an assist. It was stuff he created for himself, and then we saw it in the playoffs. That shot. Remember the shot? It hits Zadorov's leg. If it doesn't hit Zadorov's leg, that's probably going in, right? And like that post game, that sort of feeling he had, I couldn't get this done, was very present in him. And there was a guy that connected with the environment. Not a guy that you necessarily would have thought would want to play in Canada, and yet he loved and thrived in that environment, especially once they started winning. and he got to sort of show what could be done and prove that he could be that guy. That was the other thing that mattered to him, was that in many ways this was an organization that chose to believe in him twice, right? Like Jim Benning traded for him, and then Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford decided to stick around with him, and sort of gave him the keys and said, "Listen, see where we can go." And certainly last year, yeah, you're right. Like, made that difference. Was that guy? Was the legacy? So yeah, we'll see where this goes and what he means, and but 30 technically 30 playoff games played for the Vancouver Canucks, which is a heck of a lot more than any Canuck has played in recent memory. That's for sure.
You got another hour to carry on with Rink Wide. Have you seen Elliot Friedman's report here?
What happened?
The Vancouver Canucks are trading for Marcus Pettersson of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Details being worked out.
Oh, my goodness.
And I see
I bet you it's that first.
Friend Farhan Lalji says, I don't believe the Canucks are done tonight.
Oh, my God.
So I would assume that
I guess that might explain why the GM didn't want to talk.
It very well may be. We don't know what's going out the door here, but this is what happens when you're on the live stream and news breaks. So
here I go. I'm typing away.
Look, they've been linked to Marcus Pettersson forever. You got Elias Pettersson, you got Elias Pettersson, now you get Marcus Pettersson as well, although DPD may very well be on his way back to the minors here with as the team comes back off the road, although he played pretty well in the couple of games that he got into. But this is a much more significant transaction on the part of the Vancouver Canucks. And look, again, as we await the details on what the Canucks are paying to get Marcus Pettersson, this isn't a surprise. Like, this is how Jim Rutherford essentially operates. It's, make one move to sort of set up another one. So I can't say that I'm shocked that the Vancouver Canucks, and I don't know that they're taking any of the assets that they got from the New York Rangers and peddling them to the Pittsburgh Penguins, but I'm not surprised that they had a couple of things lined up and one had to happen for them to pull the trigger on the other one. It's interesting that this is how this is playing out, because a couple of years ago, when they almost traded JT Miller to the Pittsburgh Penguins, my impression had been that they were going to get at least one first-round pick, and they were going to turn around and flip that right away to the New York Rangers. I think I've said this before, for Alex Lafreniere, a former, at that point, a player that was needing a fresh start. It certainly was the mentality. So the idea of taking a first and turning around and moving it somewhere else is certainly something that I think they have thought about before. They did it last year with Phil Pronek, right? They took the Horvat pick and flipped it for Hronek. So, the multi-layered, multi-step move is not unusual. I mean, we saw the three-way deal last week with Carolina and Colorado and Chicago, although not terribly complicated on Chicago's part. I guess we'll see how if this comes to fruition here, but we'll see how that plays out, because in many ways you're sort of going, well, there is kind of a three-way deal happening here. It just doesn't involve two of the teams. Look, Marcus Pettersson's a player that the Canucks have been linked to for quite some time. So again, not surprised. The fact that he's a Pittsburgh Penguin. Not a surprise either. Again, this is a team that is familiar with Penguin players, has a history of trying to grab onto Pittsburgh Penguin players. Marcus Pettersson, for those that maybe don't know much beyond the name, Marcus Pettersson is a 28-year-old left shot defenseman, 6'5", 180 pounds. He's a pending unrestricted free agent. So he's on an expiring deal that makes $4 million, or making $4 million this year. So it isn't so much about the contract and fitting it in, because they're almost off the hook on that deal. 47 games, 3 goals, 15 assists, 18 points. They're not looking for offense here, which, again, I guess is a little bit curious. He's a guy that's played close to 500 games, 491 National Hockey League games after breaking in with Anaheim way back when. But in a lot of ways, Pat, just on that profile, I mean, that feels like more of what they like, but also more of the same here. But I mean, I guess they're hoping that this is better in terms of a bit of puck moving utility, but a big man who's not here to generate a ton of offense, but hopefully spend less time in his own zone than a lot of the defensemen that they've been working with behind Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronek on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, I can confirm that he's been picked up by the Canucks. I don't know what they've traded yet.
I'll jump in. Per Frank Saravalli 5 seconds ago, the Canucks are in the process of trading Danton Heinen.
Oh.
Back to the Penguins, the former Penguin.
So if you're moving Heinen, that's still, in a way, like, okay, yeah, it's moving on Heinen. I mean, okay, we'll see where it goes.
And look, Danton Heinen is a player that just hasn't fit in here for whatever reasons. Started the season training camp in the first couple of games on the wing with JT Miller and Brock Besser. So 2/3 of one of your opening night top 6 forward lines is no longer employed by the Vancouver Canucks. Heinen just, there was a lot of...
Desharnais. What?
There was...
Farhan says Desharnais.
Oh, all right. We're getting conflicting, or maybe both. If it was Desharnais and Heinen, the salaries certainly would match up with Marcus Pettersson, because you're looking at essentially $4 million for those two guys. But of course, Desharnais under contract for next year as well, where Pettersson, as we mentioned, on an expiring deal. So again, this is the downside of being live here. People
can watch me work.
Whatever happened? What happened to a daylight trade in the National Hockey League? It was last Friday night. Last Friday was Colorado and Carolina. Last night.
I'll just take a moment.
Okay.
And make a joke here. My boss said, "Did this trade happen while PJ was in the pool?" Because the Brock Besser signing happened while it was July 1st, and I thought things were done, and I was sitting in the pool when that happened. And then JT Miller, I think, was similar circumstances because it was early September, and I had to bail out of whatever I was doing. I was not in the pool today, Jeff, when this all first stuff happened. Jeff, you're making a face. What are you trying to figure out here?
Our friend Farhan is reporting that the Canucks send the first-round pick they received from the Rangers plus Desharnais to Penguins for Marcus Pettersson. They can't turn a first-round pick for a guy on an expiring contract.
No. So there's got to be something else here. Pitt. All right.
And no updates yet from Frank, just that they are in the process of trading Heinen. So there might even be another trade coming down here.
All right. Well, we will...
They're moving. They're doing a bunch of stuff.
Wow.
There's got to be... Here, I'll see.
Yeah, I mean, this is we need somebody to come up with absolute information on this, because that one makes no sense. Again, Marcus Pettersson on an expiring contract. He's essentially a rental player.
Okay. Yeah, a player that they probably want to keep.
But we're talking about
I get it.
Pick from the Rangers.
Conditional pick. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, maybe there's more to it.
Wow. I mean, we need the dust to settle here. I mean, not surprised that Pettersson was a player that they were interested in. Wouldn't that have been something if it had been a Pettersson leaving the roster on the same day that JT Miller did? But just an extraordinary day for the Vancouver Canucks. Why it's happening basically at midnight Eastern, who knows, on the night that the team played. But the hockey world never stops. And interesting, too, that we wondered what impact the Four Nations Faceoff might have on trades, where we just don't get this arbitrary break in the schedule. I mean, most years it's an all-star weekend, but it kind of feels like teams are using this as an opportunity to take stock of where they are in the standings, what they've got, maybe what they want to do. I don't think that any of this is the Canucks reacting to the Calgary Flames, but of course the Flames are the team that is immediately ahead of them in the Western Conference standings. And the Flames think that they got better with the acquisitions of Frost and Farabee yesterday. And so for the Vancouver Canucks, the timing is interesting at the very least, that they go out and are as active as they have been here in the last 6 or 8 hours on this Friday afternoon that turns into a Friday evening. We've also been alerted by the Canucks that Patrik Allvin is going to be made available at the airport upon arrival on Saturday afternoon. So again, the Canucks overnighting in Dallas at the end of the road trip and flying home tomorrow, and that's where they're choosing to make Patrik Allvin available. So we are supposed to hear from the Canucks general manager on Saturday afternoon, and who knows, he may have 4 or 5 deals done by then, Patrick. We just don't know.
Whole new team. Hey, listen, I wrote a column a couple weeks ago saying, hey, look at what Pat Quinn did in 1991. He just started making trades. Pat Quinn made multiple trades in January, and then obviously made the big trade in March. So time to reset your team, reset your culture, get things moving. They're clearly doing that right here.
Some people are pointing out, and I do wonder, again, if you're parting with a first rounder for Marcus Pettersson, do you make that trade having a deal in place for a guy that's on an expiring contract? Like, is this a player that they are going to announce that they've signed to some sort of extension as well? Like, I can't imagine that you would part with even a conditional first rounder for a player that you have no guarantees that you're going to have beyond this season.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah. I mean, I guess you're looking at.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. The full trade was announced by the Canucks. We have it up on screen right now, so I don't know if you guys have seen it, but the full trade via the Canucks official
Drew
Twitter
O'Connor
account is up on screen.
Heinen, Desharnais, Fernstrom, and their first.
All right, so they take the pick they got from the Rangers earlier today. Melvin Fernstrom was their first pick, but a third rounder in last year's draft. Vincent Desharnais, who has this year and next left at $2 million, and Danton Heinen, who also has a year left on his contract. So Desharnais and Heinen are both mistakes of this front office, guys that didn't pan out. Now, we've said this before. This is one thing that this front office does, and I think for the most part does well. They recognize their mistakes, and they don't let them stew. They move off them. We've seen this before. We've seen it with a handful of players. Marcus Pettersson, the defenseman that we talked about, Drew O'Connor, a forward, and I've heard that name linked to the Canucks as well, so maybe not shocked that it turns out that Drew O'Connor is on his way to Vancouver as well. As I look at Drew O'Connor, for those that don't know, 26-year-old, 6'4", 209-pound left shot, left winger, 6 goals on the season, 30 goals in his National Hockey League career. They must feel that there's some upside. Had 16 goals and 33 points last year. So, if you can acquire a player. But, Danton Heinen basically had those numbers last year, and they were hoping that he was going to be able to build on that. So, that's the outlier season for Drew O'Connor. Otherwise, it's 3 goals and 5 goals, and this year 6. So, I think very much still a wait and see. They must believe in the player to make the deal. But,
he's a player that I know I've discussed with Jim Rutherford in the past, just as an example of a player that they identify as a collegiate free agent. Brought him in, and have in Pittsburgh. He became a pretty useful depth forward. He's not a stud, but I think he's a guy that's going to look. You can see the size and the weight, right? Like listed at 209. Whether he's playing at 209, we don't know. But 6'4", a big, solid unit. I know a frustration that Tocchet had with the likes of Heinen was, he never saw him play on top of the puck. We know Rick Tocchet wants those guys on his third and fourth lines to play on top of the puck, to be that hard to play against. And Heinen had, he was a smart player, and he scored a few goals and this and that and the other, but he didn't move the meter in the way I think that Tocchet wanted that to be moved. So, as you noted, it's interesting to see they've gotten off 2 mistakes. They're admitting this is not a new thing. They make mistakes, and then they move along, and or they find a way to move on from them. So, not the first time we've seen this.
Yeah, Ilya Mikheyev comes to
Ilya Mikheyev, or in a way, Riley Stillman, right? Like they've turned these guys into things. They signed 2 players, and they've now helped turn them into 2 other players. The price of the first rounder, you're right, Jeff, feels steep. Especially when you're moving all these parts. Melvin Fernstrom was a neat prospect, but still a depth prospect, a guy probably not going to make it. Part of that saying where all prospects are bad prospects. But like in the long run, this is a team they're trying to make this into a playoff team. And it's a team that right now wasn't doing enough. So, how does this shift the culture of the room overall? There is a big turnover here. It's not just like we said. JT Miller's leaving. They've brought in 4 guys today. That is going to be a very different room when we walk in there on Sunday.
Yeah.
There's going to be a bunch of new faces. I'm now, one of the first things I thought about, I've always thought about, okay, who sits where, right? That there's that funny kind of culture. Obviously, the room is different. Let's be fair. Let's be honest. It's not how it quite used to be. But, I found myself, who's going to sit in JT's spot, right? That was, Bo used to sit over there. Who sits there? Who's going to move to the front of the room? There's been some empty spots. It's not a big deal, but, there is an element there. So, you're integrating 3 or 4 guys on Sunday. How that's all going to shake out is going to be really interesting.
And look, I have no idea. I'm with you. I don't know if Fernstrom was ever going to play, but it is interesting to note that he was their first pick, the third rounder. So from last year's draft class, you've got Riley Patterson, Anthony Romani, Parker Alkos, and Basil Sansanens. Long shots all to ever make the National Hockey League.
Yeah.
But, the year before, it's Tom Willander. They've already traded Hunter Brzustevich. They're hopeful that Sawyer Mineo becomes something. Ty Mueller is an interesting prospect, having a nice season down in Abbotsford. Vilmer Ulriksson, the big Swede. But you go back to the 2022 draft, Jonathan Lecker-Mackey and D. Petey. After that, Dorrington was part of that. He's gone. Nobody from the 2021 draft has ever played in the National Hockey League, and Klimovich, I'm not sure that he's going to make that happen. 2020 draft, Yanni Yermo is no longer part of the group here, and nobody from the 2020 draft has played in the National Hockey League. And, of course, 2019, the draft here in Vancouver, Vasily Podkolzin, their first round pick, top 10. He's no longer here. So you got Nils Höglander and a couple of other pieces. But for a team that we talk about, not a lot in the system and not a lot from their draft class, we should mention as well that Jonathan Lecker-Mackey sitting out his second straight game for the Abbotsford Canucks, where I was told by Patrick Alleyne last weekend that awkward-looking fall in Tucson wasn't believed to be serious, but he hasn't played since. And so, that story a little curious as well for Jonathan. And I hope he's okay, because the fall didn't look great, but again, was told that, no, not too serious, but not playing tonight out in Abbotsford for the baby Canucks.
No, and I had a brief exchange with someone midweek where they sort of said, "Hey, and they're like, he's gonna be fine." But like you said, if things sometimes emerge later, if you did suffer a head, he obviously clearly suffered some kind of face injury. That was the main thing that was led to believe. But the way he went into the boards and the way he was obviously in pain, made you wonder about other things. The fact he skated off the ice was a good sign.
Yeah.
But still. Yeah, that's a star prospect, and you never want to see your star prospect going into the boards the way he did. Obviously in the short term, they will hope he's healthy. But in the long run, if they don't keep Brock Besser, that's a guy they need, and they don't need him not playing games because he's dealing with an injury like that. They need him playing games and making himself closer to being an NHL player.
I see the chat's having a little fun. Shamik says, Pettersson passes to Pettersson, who centers it to Pettersson.
It's possible.
We'll see. DPD's got to get in the lineup again and make all that happen. And as they bring in another National Hockey League bona fide National Hockey Leaguer, we'll see if there is room for DPD. But, of course, Vinny Desharnais is on his way out, but he had been a healthy scratch here for the past week or so. I can't recall exactly when his last game was, but DPD played, and then Juleson came back, and he's been in the lineup for the last couple of games. So, yeah, all sorts of moving parts. And again, if you're just joining the live stream, we've extended it here because late night news on a Friday with the Vancouver Canucks making their second significant deal of the day. And this one goes to the Pittsburgh Penguins. That first rounder that they acquired from the New York Rangers no longer belongs to the Vancouver Canucks. It has been shipped off to the Pens. And so, how many times a decade ago were people screaming for the Canucks to weaponize cap space, add first round draft picks? And this is twice now under this regime that they've made a deal, received a first rounder, and poof, like that, have turned around. And look, I'm not saying that's the wrong move, but for those people that want to see the Canucks have multiple swings in the first round, you're going to have to wait because they're back to their own first rounder, and we'll see if that's in play as we move closer to the trade deadline.
Well, and I can't help but notice they still have a bunch of cap space here.
Yeah.
Right? Going forward, obviously shifting things around, this opens up the ability to extend Pettersson if that's what they want to do. But they still have cap space and realistically still have at least one hole up front. Realistically, probably a center. Does that mean Brock Besser becomes a center? In terms of a trade. That's what I found myself looking at. It's going to be very interesting. month.
Yeah.
You know what?
March 7th.
March 7th, right?
7th,
So
yes.
you know, however many weeks that is, with including the Four Nations. It's gonna be interesting to see where things go, because you know this is an aggressive Friday. Certainly, like I said, reshaping your team in a very dramatic way. Pettersson's name we heard for a long time. I had the feeling Canucks were trying to see if they could find a player that was a little more, a little more than what he was. They certainly, I think, felt he was fine as a baseline. But finding a player that maybe, you know, I mean, everyone talked about Rasmus Andersson, but you know, on the high end, a guy like Mackenzie Weegar, but obviously the Flames are never going to give him up. But a player like that, you know, that made sense if you're flipping a first rounder. Now, obviously, they're banking on the Rangers now being some sort of playoff juggernaut, and not, you know, I mean, it was a top 13 pick, or sorry, top 13 protected. So if they'd fallen out of the playoff chase, almost certainly the pick was going to shift to next year. And then it became a question of how bad would the Rangers be next year. But if the Rangers make the playoffs, it's kind of, you know, okay, you know, it's a wash, I guess.
Crazy123 in the chat, very astute, says now there are 2 EPDs, Elias and Elias, but with Marcus Pettersson, another defenseman, there's 2 DPDs as well. This is getting very confusing. I think we just stick to Marcus. We'll just call this guy Marcus. It'll work for everybody.
Just Marcus, just put Marcus on his back, no Pettersson.
Yeah, like,
I mean, I think they're allowed to do that.
International soccer, just
Yeah,
go with the first name. I guess as I sit here, like, we got to sort of step back now and try and assess what they've got, because they've got these 4 games before the All-Star, the Four Nations face-off. Like, I am curious what Sunday's lineup is going to look like. Again, when you're trading with American teams, it's not always as simple as getting guys in here. So, you know, are we going to see a few guys called up from Abbotsford that are going to get plugged in here to fill some gaps? Again, if you're keeping score at home, if you've got a wall chart, JT Miller, Danton Heinen, Vincent Desharnais, they're the guys off the NHL roster today. Eric Brandstrom, Melvin Fernstrom, Jackson Dorrington, and the conditional first rounder. They're gone. And in return, the Canucks have added Philip Hedl, Marcus Pettersson, Drew O'Connor, and Vincent Mancini, who is, by all accounts, an American Hockey Leaguer knocking on the door to get a look in the National Hockey League, with just 15 National Hockey League games for the New York Rangers, so it's impossible to call this guy a full-time NHLer just yet.
No, but I mean, the fact he's played 15 games is something, I guess. You know,
I think he's trending, and he's probably worth a look here as well.
And I mean, you know, 1 year out from college, like he's kind of that classic in that Jim Rutherford, you know, NCAA, let's find what we can, guys. These guys that are, I don't know if Moneyball is the way to go, because I mean, one of the principles of Moneyball way back when was finding college batters or college pitchers because they were more ready to go, less variability, higher floor but lower ceiling, you know, and so that's kind of what you get with. And Drew O'Connor looks like exactly that kind of player. So yeah, it's a sort of a move. Let's see how good we can be right now, and can we maybe get a little, you know, extra 5% out of all these guys, and that adds up to something.
This is a Canucks post-game pod, and so we're looking at it from Canucks perspective, but my goodness, Patrick, like, if you're the Penguins, if you're Sidney Crosby, like, we've already talked about some of the strange moves, you know, waiving Tristan Jarry earlier this season, some of the other things that they've done here, and now you trade, okay, an expiring asset, I get that, in Marcus Pettersson, and I'm just looking at Drew O'Connor. Do we know what his contractual situation? They've already moved him on Puckpedia. He's got to go to the Canucks page now. That's how quickly things move in this day and age. But Drew O'Connor, as I bring up the numbers in front of me here,
925
UFA. Free agent.
Yeah.
So again, okay, you know, we'll see where that goes. Obviously, for the Penguins, like, yes, they pay a price. They take on Heinen. They take on Vincent Desharnais. But they're all about getting that first rounder. But like, how do you sell that to Sid at this stage of his career? Like, this organization's going nowhere.
Yeah. Well, they're going somewhere different than he's been used to, that's for sure.
Yes.
I think you try to keep being honest with them and saying, listen, this is what's going to happen. This is what we have to do. We don't have a choice, and we are happy to send you to the Colorado Avalanche or whoever, you know? Like, do you want to go try for that? We're happy to send you to the Vancouver Canucks.
Who have just a crap load of cap space now, but they're going to spend some of it obviously on Marcus Pettersson. I don't know about Drew O'Connor. You know, they would have a better sense of what their plans are for a player on an expiring contract like that. But But, yeah, I mean, look, we're seeing the roster overhaul that this management group felt was necessary. In the short term, I don't know that the Vancouver Canucks are better. We know that we can talk about all the cap space they've got. This isn't a banner season or off season for unrestricted free agents. And in fact, Brock Besser is one of the top pending UFAs. And if you move off him, you got to replace, even if he's having a down year compared to last year, he still scores goals for this outfit and this operation. And I'll put you on the spot. Jake DeBrusk or Brock Besser, who's older?
Brock Besser.
No.
What?
Jake DeBrusk is 6 months older
okay.
than Brock Besser. So they're essentially the same age. Brock's going to turn 28. Jake turned 28 this, I think, October.
Right.
But, they had no issue committing the long-term contract to Jake DeBrusk.
Right.
And yet this seems to be different
but Jake
players.
DeBrusk is also only on $5 million a year, right? He's
Fair
cheap.
enough.
He's a cheaper player.
I understand.
Is he better? I don't know. They're different players. I mean, I have long said I think Brock Besser's two-way game is underrated.
Yeah.
I was disappointed. I had always thought he was actually kind of a decent winger face-off man. I was disappointed to discover that among players, right wingers who have taken 25 face-offs or more in NHL this season, he is dead last. But that's a side point. I think he's a better. Jake DeBrusk does a lot of things well.
As we've seen, very streaky.
Very streaky. I mean, so is Brock.
Yeah.
But I have generally felt that he's just been a more consistent player. Not that I've had a problem with DeBrusk. DeBrusk at 5, the cap hit he's at is incredible. That is an absolutely fantastic. So, that is kind of the dilemma with Besser. And I got that. I really got that sense when I asked Alvin about him. When was that? Last week? Monday?
Yeah, it's 10, 11 days ago.
Right?
Yep.
And he chuckled. I said he loves being here, and Patrick understood what I was going with, and he chuckled. And essentially, said, well, there's a lot of him. I've actually looked at the quote today, and it was just a lot of jumbled whatever. But him basically saying, listen, yeah, we'll see. Which was, to me, the biggest sign was we'd probably re-sign the player if he'd come back on the same number. But, and then you look at the cap going up today the way it is. I mean, there's little doubt that he can get a bigger number if he goes somewhere else just because of the inflationary pressure.
But they may, now with all this cap space, maybe this is signaling that they've had some sort of shift, that they recognize that you got to go out there and replace his goal somehow, some way. And again, it's not a bumper crop necessarily on the unrestricted free agent market. So we'll see how it goes. Quote in the Canucks' latest press release, it's hard to keep up with them all. Patrick Alvin wishing Danton and Vinny all the best in Pittsburgh. Thanks them for the contributions. And then he says, we're really happy to add to the depth of our team with the acquisitions of Marcus and Drew. Marcus has good size, reach, and makes solid decisions with the puck, while Drew is an intelligent player with versatility and a bigger frame. And, of course, that'll be music to the ears of Rick Tocchet.
Yeah.
Anytime you can get bigger, bigger's not always better, but
they're working hard to recreate the 2020 Pittsburgh Penguins. That's what they're doing.
But they sort of tried that last year with all the Penguins guys that they brought in as well.
True.
What a day. What an extraordinary day for the Vancouver Canucks. And a day I think that we felt was coming to some degree, but didn't expect too significant moves in the span of a handful of hours. But we'll let the dust settle. Unless you've got anything else. It's hard to process in real time.
Yeah.
Appreciate everybody that stuck with us this extended version of Rink Wide Vancouver. A lot of ground to cover, obviously, and we thank everybody in the chat who was busy in there as well. Lots to talk about, lots to consider as the Vancouver Canucks really undergo a fairly fundamental change here in the way that they're going to look moving forward. And again, flying home from Dallas tomorrow, so no practice day. Next time, with the 5 o'clock start again on Sunday, I don't imagine there'll be a morning skate. So the next time we see the Vancouver Canucks on the ice probably is warm-up ahead of that game against the Red Wings on Sunday. And that's when we'll be back with our next episode of Rink Wide Vancouver.
With a 5 p.m. start? Will they still do a morning skate?
I always think...
Because that's one of those 8:30 scenarios, 9:30.
Yeah, the fact that they're not skating tomorrow, maybe they go early for a morning skate. We'll see. Generally, in my mind, anything before 6 o'clock, they consider an early start, and quite often we don't see them. Like in St. Louis on Monday, it was a 4:30. It was a 6:30 start St. Louis time, and they didn't have a morning skate. But I think that was more a choice. They practiced at home on Sunday, and then they flew. So, yeah, we'll see where it all goes. We'll see what this roster looks like moving forward. We thank everybody that got through with the Super Chats early on. Again, proceeds go into the BC Mental Health Foundation there, so you're supporting a good cause when you reach out with your contributions here on Rink Wide Vancouver. 5-3. Remember there was a game earlier tonight? Yeah, there was a game. Connor Garland, Jake DeBrusk, and Carson Soucy, the goal scorers. Danton Heinen had an assist, so in his final game as a Canuck, he got an assist on that Carson Soucy goal just seconds before the final buzzer. But that is going to do it for us. We'll see what Saturday brings. Hey, if they make more moves, we may have to jump back in the chair here. But we're kind of hoping that we'll take a Saturday off and get back at it on Sunday after the Canucks take on the Detroit Red Wings at Rogers Arena. So want to thank Jacob and Nick working hard. Working longer than they expected behind the scenes.
Great work, guys.
Shout out to them.
Putting up with us.
You didn't know what you were getting into
God.
when you agreed
Double
to do
my fee.
this. But glad to have you here. Covered a lot of ground, the hockey game and the trades as well. But that is going to do it for us here on this extended version of Rink Wide Vancouver.